Welcome to the fourth episode of Eco Yogis, where we hear firsthand from spiritual yogis on how the paths of spirituality and environment align. My name is Lauren, and the series is brought to you by the Brahma Kumaris. Today, I'm pleased to welcome to you our very special guest all the way from France today, Sister Valeriane Bernard. So since the age of 25, Valeriane has actively led a spiritual life as a meditation student, teacher, and meditation center coordinator. Valeriane is the representative of the Brahma Kumaris at the United Nations and has been involved in the ecological movement for almost 30 years now, promoting sustainable development and raising awareness on climate change. So it's a pleasure to have you here all the way to Australia today.
It's great to be able to travel in a click.
In just a second. So sister, I would like to hear from you personally, your story. What pulled you towards meditation and spirituality?
I think my natural curiosity when I was a little kid, I always thought there is more than this to life. There is more than this. And so I remember my family was quite strong in many ways. And so one day I asked God, I said, look, they might not believe in you, some of them, but I want to know what you understand by the bad people. What are bad people? Because, you know, my family was politically very, very oriented, and they felt that if a bunch of guys were dead, it would be a lot better, that therefore we just had to kill them. And I thought, no, that's not right. So I was 4 or 5 and sat in my bed and I said to Baba, which I didn't know was called Baba then, I said, look, I want to know how you understand. And I got an answer. I still posted my clean, innocent heart, pulled Baba's knowledge and wisdom towards me. So as you see, it was always part of my understanding that there was more to life than just what was visible about it.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And
so when
that
I
really empathy.
I really actively read the Bhagavad, read the Ramayana, read Khalil Gibran, and when I was 24, I encountered the Raj Yoga Brahma Kumari philosophy.
And in Raj Yoga, of course, I'll just ask you briefly, because you mentioned Baba just then, for the audience listening today, would you be able to briefly touch on
Well,
Baba?
when you're a kid, you see God as a bit of a father in the sky, kind of super gentle Father Christmas. And in Hindi, Baba means father, you know, Papa or Daddy. So, you know, there is this feeling about God, that he's the all provider dad that really is there for those who know in their hearts how to be innocent, remember him and fall upon him.
Thank you. And so I'm curious then, you've also been very involved with the environment. So how did you get pulled to become involved with that, especially from a spiritual perspective?
Again, when in childhood, I used to just love sitting quietly and appreciate the silence and the trees and the sun and the flowers and the grass. I felt that, you know, Earth was a little bit of a magic box on which we were sitting. And when I became 16, 17, 18, I became very aware that most human beings were just seeing nature as a resource bank that they could just go and take from. And I could see the imbalance that was happening because of that. So when I was 16 already, I started go in demonstrations about that. But then when I took a spiritual path to myself, I also realized that, there is the importance of looking at things from a spiritual angle. And this spiritual angle has to be comprehended from within, but it has to be shared like a platform with everybody else.
Beautiful. I love the analogy that it's like a magical box, the earth. Yeah, it's wonderful. So I think this leads on well into talking about the role that you're playing with the United Nations, especially with the Brahma Kumaris Environmental Initiative. So which you have the representative role for that initiative at the United Nations. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about that and how the Brahma Kumaris is connected with the United Nations? If you've got any fun stories from that.
Okay, so I think many people use the words NGOs, but not everybody knows what is the political structure of the UN and what roles NGOs play. So the political structure of the UN is interesting to understand because it happened, yesterday we celebrated victory. And it was like a deep understanding of humankind that we need to create a United Nations vision so that this never happens again. This means Second World War. And the nations therefore became like a way in which many of the global issues and problems could be looked at. But very quickly also it became obvious that there were organizations that were working globally, but that were not political, weren't governments, and that therefore they had an expertise to share with the United Nations. And Brahma Kumaris is one of them. We have presence in over 120 countries. So it means that we also work with women, we work with children, we work with education. We have a vision and a work also with environment, as we're seeing today. So it became obvious that these special organizations, non-governmental organizations, had a role to play. So Brahma Kumaris got their status of a general consultative status at the UN, which is a good status. Really, not many organizations have it. At that time, I think only 50 or 60 had it when we got it in the 80s. And so it means that we as organizations have a right to attend not all the debates, but many debates at the UN. And we also can present declarations that will be part of the documents of the Human Rights Council, because that's where I'm based, it's Geneva, or the General Assembly in New York. And we also have the right to deliver oral statements, which will be read within the assemblies. But also we work together because as NGOs, we are aware that many of the problems aren't tackled certain ways that we feel should be the answer, and so we act together, we write declarations together, we connect with countries, we try to make our point of view understood by the diplomats and their capitals. So this is the kind of work that we do at the UN.
Thank you. No, I think that explains a lot, because to everyday people, we don't necessarily hear the day-to-day, what happens, how different NGOs are involved. I was wondering if you had any stories from that, from how the Brahma Kumaris as an NGO, what they've been able to do with the different government organizations I know yesterday you'd mentioned one, if you'd like to share, for example, consciousness and climate change.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we became present on the climate change front since Copenhagen, which was a major conference regarding climate change. And so we've been there for over 12 years now, regularly. And I was sharing with you yesterday that when we first arrived, our stand was saying consciousness and climate change. And most delegates from countries, but also from the UN itself or for other NGOs, would come and say, consciousness and climate change? And what does it have to do? It's like, you know, they were really puzzled and wondering why we were here. And so we had to explain, you know, if the state of the world is the way it is in terms of climate change, it's because we produce, we over consume, we over buy, we want to earn more money. So there is selfishness, there is greed, there is violence, there is indifference in terms of balance and well-being. It's a problem of consciousness. And we say, oh yes, it is. So that was a very interesting way to move into the climate change debate for us.
It certainly is.
And another little story, you know, since I've been present in Geneva, because that's where I'm based, we realized over 15 years ago that climate change was going to be something that would really deprive people of their human rights. So we were aware that it would be so important to have a special mechanism that would study how climate change in the countries, in different places, was having an impact on people's human rights, because people's human rights is their rights, right? So at the beginning, it was very difficult because, you know, the UN is like, human rights is human rights, climate change and climate change. Climate change is happening in Bonn. The UNFCCC takes care of that. And human rights have been taken care of in Geneva. The Human Rights Council is taking care of that. We don't want to, you know, but we wanted to make a bridge. And this year, it looks like the bridge will finally happen. But it took like, you know, 12 to 13 to 14 years of work, making people aware, speaking about it, connecting with the diplomats, creating side events and webinars. And so that's the job that NGOs do, that Brahma Kumaris does.
That would take a lot of patience, but the reward's certainly worth it.
And a vision, you have to have a vision, you have to keep at it. Because countries, you know, they're not like little children who change their mind every second. Governments are quite stable in their positions.
So true. So talking of the different groups that you've been involved with over the years, another one that you've been heavily involved with is the interfaith group as well. So can you tell us about the work that the faith organizations do for climate change and the environment?
Sure. So first, let me again come back to the UN setting. One of the important things is to see that the UN itself, if there's one little organization called Brahma Kumaris that says something, they're not going to pay much attention. But if you get a bunch of organizations that agree together that this is important, that this has to be looked at, and we kind of bring the many people behind us of these many organizations, then we are representative. You know, we represent a good bunch of people. So I realized very quickly that our natural partners, being a spiritual organization, was to partner with other faith-based organizations. So I became interested to connect with them, speak with them, to bring forward the whole ethical aspect of whatever I'm working on, climate change or environment, and bring that forward to the countries, because I think that when you bring the ethical point of view, they can't really say we don't care. You know, it's like each government wants to look good, and it's something that's important. If you don't have ethics, you're not good, basically.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's ways to sway their positions that are very selfish and not understanding of others, or not seeing the vulnerables, or not seeing the poorest. So naturally, I became part of these groups of interfaith and started connecting people together. And I love that. I love connecting people together. So this is one of my jobs.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Another, I guess, thing that I know you've had a lot of experience in as well is working with the vulnerable. And it's really a theme, I guess, is all these humanitarian and ethical things. So I know that you've worked as an educator for young people under protective orders. You've designed and implemented training for female victims of violence, and done some training in values and ethics to stave off corruption in the workplace. So as we look then at climate change and the effects of climate change, we're going to be looking at a lot of social impacts too, and especially that will impact the vulnerable. So, you know, as a eco-yogi, as we're calling it in the series, what do you think that eco-yogis, you know, anyone on the spiritual path who is also concerned about the impacts of climate change, what can we do to help those most vulnerable?
First, let me say that I think it's much of my own personal family background. My grandparents were freedom fighters during the Nazi governments, the war. My grandfather never got caught, but he got killed very little after the war. Oh. And my grandmother was put in jail. So I have a strong background of caring. You know, my family used to care for everyone, you know, and that's why they were doing what they did. So I think I inherited with my cultural family culture, I inherited a lot of that. And caring for others was something that I felt made sense. You know, I think that people who have a life that doesn't make sense often is because they don't have enough love for others. They don't care enough about others. And then they start wondering about the value of their lives. And if your value is very connected to the value you give others, actually. So I suppose that for me, being a yogi means being able to connect to the highest possible source of love, source of wisdom, source of generosity and kindness and purity and beauty. And I feel that this is really something that we're so lucky, those who are yogis, that we've had the sensitivity to open up and be able to catch these vibrations and understand and appropriate to ourselves this energy. And I think that for me, it makes sense if you share, if you pass it on, if you open it up, if you start thinking about how everyone on earth should really have this privilege. I'm not, you know, anything really different than anyone else. I one of us, and we are family, a human family. So I think this vision is very strong for me. And for me, I look also on nature. There is this Indian concept of Purush and Prakriti. Purush is the observer, the spiritual sparkle, and Prakriti is nature. And they together play a role. Purush by himself can't. Prakriti by itself is also not active. So the two together, but if Purush is under the influence of Prakriti, and Prakriti then is under the influence of Purush, then there is imbalance. And in the same way, I love the concept of the indigenous people who see Pachamama as Mother Nature, who is so generous that we have air we can breathe, we have water we can drink, we have bodies to express ourselves. So therefore, I feel that this generosity of human family, is also family with nature. I am nature. This is nature. Should also be there. So the concern that I have for life should be extended to Mother Nature.
Thank you. So I'm hearing, this real theme of it's coming from our consciousness of how we view things and value things and appreciate things. Tying that in before, as you were saying, consciousness and climate change. It extends to the human family as well. That's beautiful.
And the consciousness, the more I will do my inner work of refining my understanding of consciousness, but I will also refine my relationship with consciousness. And I will refine also how I treat, how my relationship is with myself, with the source of love, and with nature. The more these relationships are aligned, the more I think we can bring some harmony back on our planet very strongly.
And this probably leads well into the next question. What impacts have you seen that Brahma Kumaris have had in the environmental arena, and what do you think that they can offer, uniquely in that space?
I think that the whole topic of consciousness, as I was telling you in the beginning, was totally absent of people's mind when looking at climate. I think that this has become more and more a verified truth. We also have brought, not only us, because we work, I think awareness develops in waves, and you can't write your name on a wave, it's just bigger than you. So I think the Brahma Kumari are part of this wave of awareness building, of spiritual awareness building, of spiritual awareness of the care we have to have for one another. But of course, the Christians, the Muslims, the Islam relief people, the Catholic movements, some of them are brilliant in their humanitarian work. But we somehow bring spiritual into our work in a unique fashion that I think has, influenced and tainted the work. And as I was saying, when I first arrived in Geneva, no way was a mandate on climate change and human rights going to happen. And this year it's happening. So it's not a spiritual impact I've been having, but because of the spiritual awareness and bringing the spiritual aspect of ethics and morals, you manage to get people to understand that they cannot not act on that.
And also I feel, just another thought that's come to me as you were saying that is, when we do these actions, it's also about, how we do them, where it's coming from in here, or in here in the heart, you know, our intentions as well. So yeah.
Intention is at the heart of it all.
As is the seed, I guess, as is the fruit. So, oh, congratulations! That's great news.
Well, after the wave.
Yes.
Wave.
So I guess looking forwards then, where would you like to see the work that you do in relation to the environmental initiative? Where would you like to see that go in the future?
That's a very good question. It's a visionary question. I am not sure how much of a visionary I'm going to be in my answer, how far my eyesight goes into the future. But I see that you know, when we first arrived, of course, we weren't there on that theater, so we weren't part of a collective energy of faith-based organizations. And now we are. So in a sense, we bring the ingredients of spirituality that we practice into it. But also, I think that somehow we've managed where I'm working to create a community feeling. And I'm trying to do that in many different ways. And I think that this community feeling is very important for the work and the future of our work. Because, you know, the world is everyone's responsibility. So it's a community, it's a common work. And now we speak at the UN in language of the commons, you know, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's like the air is a common, the earth is a common. You know, you can't say countries or air because it travels around. It's so I think that this kind of understanding is spreading, of spiritual understanding is probably spreading in many different ways. And I can see many people who were very protective of their own organization, and I would say maybe excluding others, are now opening up. So I think that this is probably something that will happen in the future more and more. And so our initiative is also happening on the ground. As you know, I think next week you'll have the interview of the person who's doing a lot of work in Australia itself. So you'll have the possibility of seeing how things happen locally, which is really interesting. And one of the things they've done in relation to your question is also write some meditation commentaries and record some meditation commentaries on serving the planet, on serving the elements, because I feel that it has to be balanced. There is the political aspect of work, which is sometimes heavy, but I had to do the other part, because sometimes, you know, you come and you hope countries will take decisions that would guarantee a better future for many, but they don't. And you know the consequences. You studied the science, you studied the implications, and it is heartbreaking. So that's why I've also balanced this into this work on the environment, the planet, doing things. So I think that in the future, probably also this is something very important. We live on a sacred planet, and the whole matter is sacred when we remember that it is. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually, we had here in Australia locally, we had a local conference of youth just a few months ago in February, you know, which is related to United Nations, and one of the themes out of that was really a huge theme on the importance of community. So hearing you talk about, involving community and that we're thinking about the common, it's, it's just reminding me of that and how much people do value that. So, so I have one last question for you before I'll ask you if you can do a guided meditation for us. So for this last question, as you know, many people out there who are involved in helping the environment, they come across a lot of challenges along the way. So I was wondering if you have any tips or any messages of hope that you would like to share with them.
Thank you. I think that it is important to remember that each one of us is more than it looks. What I mean by that is that sometimes we are faced with very unjust, unfair realities, a lot of violence. I know that every year a lot of activists in the environment field are killed. So it is a violent world and people try to do their best. But I think that it's so important to remember that I have to look at the relationship I'm creating with myself, the scope of my understanding, and how much I bring into myself what I want for the world. Because we want our planet to be healthy. But do I care for myself in the same way? Like, am I caring for my inner health, my inner well-being, my compassion? Is it, how much am I treating myself with compassion and care and love? And very often we are concentrating out there. This has to happen. This needs to change. And I think my message of hope is to say, take time for yourself. Take time for yourself and see that you bring to yourself what you want for the world, because that will make you a far more powerful microphone into the world, a far bigger light into the darkness, a far more inspiring voice of love in the wilderness. So yeah, I think this is very important. And then also part of hope for me is to remember that the individuals we're dealing with who are not taking the right decisions, who are very influenced by their own greed and selfishness, they're suffering themselves. We have to have compassion for these people, because if I don't learn the compassion for these people and I'm just angry with them and I'm just negative towards them and I'm just wanting them to go away, which I understand fully because, it has happened to me too, I'm not going to be able to take the right decisions for my own mind and for my relationship. So I think that by understanding that people who are taking wrong decisions are selfish, yes, but they're caught up into a far more complicated thing of a web of a bad spider that is affecting them. So if I see things like that, when I address to some people who are really not kind, not taking the right decisions, I remember that. And then they kind of start listening to me a little bit. They open up. And that's what's needed. We need people to open up. And who knows, in films, the bad guys sometimes become good guys. And I think that could also happen in our work. But we really have to be able to see them as potential good guys, because otherwise they just kind of fight us. And maybe another message of hope is that there is far more possibilities of solutions than we can visualize. It's not in our hand. Nature is very generous. And so who knows, the solution will happen. You know, we have to have faith in the solution, because I think many of us, by working with human understanding on human factors, we have lost hope in many kind of ways. And it's important to feel that, okay, there might be something just around the corner.
That's beautiful. I feel like every part of that message was gold and very inspiring as well. So thank you. Thank you. So before we wrap up today, I was hoping that we could have a guided meditation commentary.
Thank you. So first, let me sit down peacefully. Let me breathe. When I breathe, let me be aware of the huge amount of work of nature, for this air to come into my lungs, trees and plants, winds and clouds are there, producing good air, all of us. So when I inhale, I be grateful to all the leaves and little twigs and grass that just contributed to making this air healthy to breathe. And when I breathe out, I want to charge this air with care and love, with energy, so that when someone else breathes it, it is ointment for their lungs, but also for their soul. Now, when I breathe in, let me be aware of the sacred space of my awareness. Let me be aware that I'm creating within myself very unique space in the now moment. Let me include in this space love, care, peace, and bliss. And let me share these vibrations. Let them travel through the amazingly subtle energy of thoughts into the whole universe, affecting and coloring matter, nature, and hearts and souls. Each one of us as a small fabric of beauty in his heart, in this special place of the soul. I cook the vibrations I share with the world. the ingredients of mind, love, beauty, generosity, sweetness, purity, power, light, our mind to experience and mind to share. In this awareness, I am aware of this very unique dimension where there is a spiritual constant source of love and power accessible to my mind, accessible to me. And I can drink in the source, quench the thirst that has been with me forever. Love, peace, light, is there unlimitedly. And I just take and share these sacred vibrations with nature, trees and the rain, birds and the dolphins, the clouds and the insects, the forests, the cities. Everything can be penetrated by beauty, by spiritual energy, whenever I want. I sit and connect and share. Thank you.
Thank you again, Sister. It's been a pleasure.